In a previous video, I routed the cutout for the insert plate. Now, I have to make the grooves for the head of the screws that hold the router table fence, and the holes for the screws that anchor the insert plate. The other holes have the space underneath that I cut with the jigsaw. And when I install the insert plate, I will need to shim it a little with some paper to level it with the tabletop. If the insert plate ends up too high, that would be a problem, because I would have to make the cutout a bit deeper. Alright, with a round bit, I am going to route the groove for the screw heads. The thickness of the plate, this sheet is the same thickness, plus a bit more, just enough to hide the screw heads. And to avoid damaging the workbench while routing, I make sure I won't go through the last centimeter of plywood left in the plate's cutout. I measured from the center of the axis to the edge of the router's base, and I adjusted this strip to help me route in the center of the groove that I have to make. Here is a clamp, and since I cannot put another one here, I placed a side stop to hold against the push. To avoid the router from wobbling, this sheet is the same thickness as the insert plate. Alright, let's do this. And... well, this is what happens when you look at the camera. I told you in the previous video that some days it is better not to go into the workshop. Now we're good. Well, it is going to work just fine. It is better to make a mark. That way I know that this edge of the base needs to go from the edge of the table to the mark, to route the full length of the groove. The screw has a square section under the head that needs to fit into the insert plate slot. Now they slide perfectly. Let's finish building this router table. I drill a hole at the end of 2 wood strips. This screw fits snugly here. The 2 strips will go under the tabletop where I place the insert plate. This will go like this, on the edge of the workbench. I would drill a couple of holes here. That would continue into the workbench, and I would insert a couple of T-nuts. But I already have these 2 installed from the router table I built, with another system on my channel without comments. So, to make the most of them, I will put the screws in from below. I want them to stick out just a bit from the top. That way I can fit them into the hole I made in the wood strips. Let me hand tighten them a bit so the strips don't fall. I align them and make sure they are parallel. The router tabletop goes on the strips like this. The router will be to the side of the workbench top. And I think that way, there will be enough space to install a lift system for the router, if I buy or make one. Alright, the tabletop is aligned with the strips. This edge is further from the strip than the other one, because to have more surface in front of the bit, I place the insert plate off-center. The plate's anchor holes sit over the strips, but I couldn't center them over the strips, because I had to put the strips where the T-nuts were. If I installed new T-nuts, I could center them. The truth is, I can reuse one of the existing ones and add a third. I anchor the insert plate with some wood screws. and I measured to add more screws, this time centered on the strips. These wood screws are thin. There is no need to drill pilot holes. I must make sure the screws do not align with the miter gauge slot. I have to continue these holes so they go through the plywood board. And now, this is important. If I leave these holes like this, it will be difficult for the screws to center properly with the T-nuts. The screws will definitely get stuck when entering the nuts. That is why I'm going to enlarge the holes, so that the screws have some play and can go into the nuts without a problem. Now I can screw the router table into place. I tighten these screws, and they sink into the plywood, and don't stick out. Perfect. I insert a couple of wood screws from below the workbench tabletop. Now, after some trial and error, I managed to adjust these folded pieces of paper to shim the insert plate. What I saw is that I need to put them in the screw holes. Otherwise, when inserting the screws, the plate bends slightly. The screws fit well. I punch the paper, and in it goes. So far, so good. It is almost perfectly level with the plywood. Here, it is a bit low, but that doesn't matter. Well, almost perfect. If it gives me problems while routing, I will have to readjust the shims. Now I need to remove this knob from the base, because it bumps into one of the strips. I screw the palm router base from below the insert plate. And placing the router in position is that simple. To adjust the height of the router bit, I raise or lower it as needed. I will install a lift system when I buy one, or if I make one myself. That way, I have the power switch right here. But we all know it is better to install a safety switch. Great, it barely vibrates. Let's do a test. Well, with this kind of routing, the sawdust shoots forward. All right, pretty good. But the side fence is too short, and it doesn't provide much support at the start or the end. I think I will make a longer one, but not in this channel. You know which one. On my channel without comments. And I might make a base for this router table in another video. Thanks for watching the video, and if you like my videos, thanks for subscribing to my channel.